Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast, where every week a few friends get together with our randomly designed, randomly contrived, randomly assembled, with our eyes folded, our hands folded and ourselves blindfolded. We came up with these ideas, and now we will mix them together into a giant jambalaya. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. What story elements did you guys have?
I have history.
I have hero.
I have magic system. So I think history should go first then, right?
Okay. Well, the clan had settled in the valley. Archaeologists would speculate earlier than 4000 BC, toward the end of the Neolithic era. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead a little bit. The usual reasons: water, fruit, abundant supplies of things to gather, grazing. But there was one other thing that kept the clan here and really settled down, and that was copper. The transition out of the Stone Age took place in many localities in different ways and whatnot. Here, copper was abundant and sometimes in large, almost pure nuggets that could be beaten and shaped. So prior to smelting, they could literally form tools by just beating these one kind of stone, which turned out to be copper, with other stones and make it into shapes that were good to use for tools. And so that was kind of how the clan got settled along the river in the valley. But there was another development that came somewhat later, and nobody knows when, and that was tin. Tin is much rarer than copper. Copper is pretty abundant around the earth. Tin is, at least in ancient times, almost precious, up next to silver and gold. I mean, and it wasn't very abundant. And the thing that happened, though, quite by accident, it helped to shape the copper. Little by little, they learned kind of accidentally to do smelting, that the copper could be actually melted and then poured into, sand troughs, and they would have the beginnings of a tool that could be shaped. Well, some tin ore got mixed in.
Right.
And bronze, which resulted in a harder, denser metal than copper that would hold an edge better and was better for weapons and tools.
Right.
And there was some people, they had traders, and since they were staying put, they were kind of dependent on trade and with neighboring clans, and it was what is in present-day Uzbekistan. So it's semi-arid. People had to be pretty far apart in order to keep their herds and whatnot. But this guy was just amazed with when they offered to trade some bronze tools. Like, this is fantastic, So what happened was there would be regular traders would come.
Right.
And then, of course, the secret gets out. Like, well, how do you make, over a little quaffing some, loose lips and all that, and some fermented fruit juices and whatnot, the thing leaks out. Problem with shipping bronze is that it's heavy. It's heavy, and this guy was trading along what would become, the Silk Road back into, present day Mesopotamia, Samaria, into Anatolia, where the Hittites were, and then, to the Mediterranean Sea, and then the Greeks. And they were making bronze, but tin was really scarce, very hard to source. And so bronze was very precious. And so we've got the full swing of the Bronze Age, but sourcing tin was problematic. Well, so the clan began a kind of family enterprise of smelting the tin and not making bronze except for their own tools. But the ingots of tin, when you're going to make bronze, it's like 90% copper, 10% tin. It was, let's just say it added to the profits if you could ship ingots of tin. And these people became very wealthy and, had lived in the valley for time out of mind, and they had, cool stuff came in on the trade routes, and they shipped tin and so that the clan, that's where we find, I guess, we're in the full swing of Bronze Age commerce.
So they're at the kind of the height of their
power,
as it were.
And they got some defensible boundaries. The rock to the east, especially real rough country, mountains and rocky, and they've got good tools, good weapons, so they can defend themselves. And they're way out of the way. However, they're careful. They would lie about where their tin deposits were because they didn't want anybody to know. And so they try to protect themselves that way. But anyway, I guess that's why I just laid the basic story of the clan, I call them.
Yeah, cool. So the mountains that are near, I'm just looking at this on Google Maps. These mountains here, are these the kind of mountains that are like snowy mountains, or are these not those type of mountains?
Well,
would there be snow?
To the east there would be when you get higher up, but not so much. It's
gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nepal there would be, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's quite a ways farther, but we're looking at that more deserty area between the Caspian Sea and the mountains, kind of on the eastern edge of that, where your little cursor there is. If picture people are listening, they're, in the Uzbekistan. It's north of Turkmenistan and Afghanistan.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, Seth, should I do the magic system, or do you want to introduce the hero?
No, go ahead, do the magic system.
All right. So, there is a thing that lives in the mountains of Nepal, far up in the mountains. If they are, from what I assume, if they're cold mountains, if they're icy mountains, I mean, I don't know that they are.
Yeah, that's where, was it the tall mountain, Everest?
Oh, yeah? Okay, good. Perfect. In the mountains of Nepal, there is a thing. This thing has been living there time out of mind. Maybe some relic from the prehistoric days. It's a large drake. So a wingless dragon, basically. And it steams. You can feel the heat coming off of it. But it's not invincible. It can be killed. And it is regularly killed by the natives who live in the mountains with it. Now, time out of mind, some bacteria made some evolutionary leap and bestowed upon anything that holds the bacteria in their guts incredible stamina, incredible speed, incredible prowess when it comes to physical attributes. But it takes a toll. There are stories about the red fever or the heat sickness. It apparently wiped people out in the surrounding areas. Legend says that when hunters brought back this beast, they ate it, and then the whole village got sick and essentially, quote unquote, burned alive. Got fevers so terrible that they essentially cooked. Now, this happened for most of the inhabitants of these villages, but a few of them, feeling the sort of onset of this terrible heat, fled into the mountains where it was cooler, and there they have lived. So they are the red people. Their skin is kind of forever flushed, as if under fever. They can exist in sort of cold weather without any sort of need for any covering, and they only live to 40 years old because sort of strain on their bodies of this, whatever this introduction of this bacteria to them causes incredible prowess on their ends of speed and like sight and physical attributes, and it's almost endless, but they sort of burn with a heat. People can get this from someone, like if someone is stuck up in the mountains with them and the winters are getting really terrible, since they don't make an account for sort of making things warm enough because they don't care, they'll sort of give you an ultimatum. It's like, well, let the elder here spit in your mouth, right? Which will pass on the bile, which will pass on the bacteria, which if you survive, you'll be like us. However, you can't leave then because everywhere else is too warm. So with the permission of the committee, I'd like to say maybe we're entering into like an ice age or something. So things are getting kind of colder, and so they're starting to kind of come down now. And it sucks because if no one had Hero, I would say the hero definitely was a guy who like got stuck up there and, you know, had to deal with this. But anyways, I'm excited to hear who the hero is regardless. But yeah, that's the magic system. It's not really a magic system. It's just like it's like a holdover from some old evolutionary time, some ancient bacteria that is just like supercharging these people, you know? And so it's like when you're born, you are alive for, you know, you're out of the womb for a couple of hours, and then they initiate this thing, and if you survive, then you're fine. You know, not everyone survives, but they kind of view that as like the rite of passage, you know? But they're brutal and terrifying, and like they start to go mad when they get close to 40, and because they're like, their body is superheated, you know? Most bodies sit at like 98 degrees. Their bodies sit at like 110, you know, on a sort of normal, and then you think they get flustered, they get angry, they get irritated, and then it gets even worse, you know, but they can run as fast as a deer and, you know, see in the dark and all of these like alpha predator things that this Drake had. So that's the magic system. So they're in Nepal, maybe that's where the Drake was, but they live up in these mountains, you know. And I was thinking it would be kind of interesting if, you know how there are some bacterias and some viruses that react to certain elements. It would be interesting if maybe bronze was like a immediate kill. You know, it was like a poison to this bacteria, and therefore you stab someone with it, and it's just like you stab a person, a fever, whatever, I don't know what they're called, a fever heart, you know, a red face or whatever they call them, and it just like neutralizes the bacteria, which then just causes them to like wither and die.
When I was thinking about the history, what I did is I just Googled like Bronze Age and where did they get their tin, and it was not plentiful, and it was like speculated that it mostly came on trade routes, you know, through Mari on the Euphrates from points east.
Yeah.
And then I saw in that map that you've got up of eastern Uzbekistan close to the mountains was a big deposit of tin. So that's where they're speculating that Bronze Age, that was their main source.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking that, you know, these guys might have moved up higher up once it got out that they had this precious tin. And so they built strongholds up in the mountains, and they might have had contact with these red people.
Right. Because, you know, these red people are like not animals, but they're so completely different. Like they haven't needed to sort of pay attention to the normal sort of what keeps a person alive, you know? They have this sort of generational power which just allows them to just kind of ignore so many things. And it also, they have no old people, they have no cripples, you know? Like they have no old and no cripples. And their children are weaned incredibly quickly because they've got this thing that's kind of pushing their body to its max which unfortunately means they kind of die off at 40, but they they have a lot of the things that kind of take a civilization and cause it to slow down and have to like protect itself. They don't have, so.
See, now you guys don't know this, but like when I was your age, I was an idiot. Well, I wouldn't say an idiot. It's just that
I do that.
I was prone to make choices that weren't so good. And it was really after 40 that I began to collect any kind of sense at all. So you got a whole group of people that never get that old.
Right. A whole group of people who don't need to worry about it.
It's not a value to like, settle down and become, comfortable in your old age.
Right. No, exactly. It could even be that these bread faces or fire hearts or whatever they're called are the ones who know where the tin is.
Well, sure.
Right? And so this clan has maybe had some sort of contract with them, and then all of a sudden the sort of Bronze Age starts, and then these fire hearts are like, wait a second, that's the killing stuff.
Yeah.
That's like the one thing that gives us pause.
Yeah, it's the kryptonite.
Yeah, exactly. Seth, any intros for a hero here or no?
Well, I'll bring the hero in. We'll see how we can fit him into here.
Yeah, let's do it.
The hero, being this is in Uzbekistan. I don't know if maybe we need to find a different name. I don't know what Uzbekistan names.
Well, it wasn't
like.
probably called it back then. I don't know what it was called back then. Samarkand.
But anyways,
So
we'll just go with what I have, and we can alter it a little bit if we need to. The hero's name is Arthur, and he is kind of the, not secretary, but kind of the underling apprentice, kind of like right-hand guy of this like leading scientist, researcher of this facility of some sort. Maybe they're investigating, the effects of these Fireheart or red people,
right?
Trying to isolate something in kind of as much of a Bronze Age. And just as you're explaining that, I was thinking, okay, they're doing research and they've got like they're going up to the clan to like in like a hazmat suit. But what's a hazmat suit? So they're like got all these like bronze mail suit on with like like little slits in the this bronze linking, mask, and it's like really, really heavy, but they have like they're kind of going overboard. We're really, I don't know. It was a funny idea in my head. Just because I think hazmat suits look dorky, but and then I was just trying to think of what's a Bronze Age hazmat suit.
Well, I was thinking just like a leather blanket, with like a piece of polished glass, you just kind of wear it around you. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, I was just thinking, because if bronze was what kind of either killed the thing off or whatever, then if they knew that, then they'd have some kind of like weird like bronze suit that they'd be trying to waltz around in. But anyways, for some time now, no one has seen the leading scientist or whatever they call them.
Yeah.
But I mean, but no one has really thought too much about it because, he keeps coming out with all these great discoveries and it's coming through his office and like they're finding, let's say, I don't know, faster ways to smelt these things together.
Right.
Looking into how to maybe mix other ores that might, make even stronger materials. I mean, it's like he's on like the top edge, but like almost no one sees him. But everyone had seen him maybe like, I don't know, 5 years ago. And so most of the people in the clan or in the surrounding things know like who he is.
Right.
But know that, he's super busy, super important, and, better to leave him alone and have him come up with all these things, right? But what nobody knows is that he's been missing for the last 5 years.
Right.
And the only person that really knows that is his assistant, Arthur, who every day when he comes into the place, there's a note left for him by the scientist.
Yeah.
with instructions. Sometimes they're cryptic. Sometimes, he has to kind of figure something out. But sometimes there's simple instructions. Sometimes, and just like instructions and like pointers on different things. So he's still obviously, and they obviously seem to be coming from the scientist, but no one knows that, everyone thinks that he's just kind of, always busy back there. And maybe he's got different contraptions set up on like timer to make it seem like he's always working on something, in the wee hours of the night. If people are going to try to look in, because I mean, if this guy is gone, there'd be kind of an uproar because let's say there's been assassination attempts or kidnapping attempts or something. I don't know. And so if he is gone, it could maybe, cause some issues. But yeah, no, he's been gone, but he's been leaving, let's say, cryptic or different instructions. Sometimes there'll be several during a day. And so the assistant Arthur like knows something is up, but can't quite figure it out.
Right. So he doesn't have any idea what's going on. He's not like covering intentionally. He's covering because
like if it gets out that this guy isn't there, like I don't know how. Like at first it was just like, oh, okay, he left a note for me, right? And so they kind of, he must have been out. He must have been on a research thing, right? So sometimes they might be able to play like he's up in the mountains on a research thing, and then but so at first they might not have caught that he was gone. Because it was like, oh, he comes early in the morning, there's a note. It's like, okay, well, here's his instructions for the day, right?
But
then they kept happening. But then after like a while, like he's always leaving notes, but he's never around.
Yeah. Well, I like to think that maybe he went to the Red Face, the Fire Hearts or whatever. And so that's the reason why he's not around, is because now he like has to be in a place that's really cold all the time.
But my original thought, not
you
that
had
I
a
want
thought for it. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did have a kind of a thought for it. So
okay.
he basically made a time machine, but he brought it with him. And so he's able to send notes back, but it'll, let's say, mess up a continuum. But I don't necessarily want time travel to be a direct part of it.
Wait, he made a time machine in the Bronze Age?
I mean, why not? I mean,
well, I can think of
it's a story,
reasons.
right?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, like who knows? Like, I mean, how did they move the megalithic stones? Maybe they had some technology back then that we didn't know about, or it's, missing today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we wouldn't know that they used to save, recorded sound or images of stuff inside of stones and could, maybe like we do on like an SD card or a hard drive. And, here maybe that's what tin is.
Interestingly enough, one of the larger deposits of tin in the world is in Cornwall, well, close to Stonehenge. Just to, like, fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah, I mean,
like, that's so random, I couldn't believe it.
Like, who knows? Maybe that's where, some of different, I don't know, like gems or different kind of minerals came from, like mineralizing in different rocks, because it was some way that they were able to save information in there. And here we've been, let's say, I don't know, melting it down to make arrowheads and hammers.
Right.
That was just kind of a thought of mine for a while, kind of thinking like, oh, we go into all these places and there's like just like, I don't know, like cave drawings. And if you think about it, like you find other things, it's like, okay, people have always known how to draw stuff, right? But then why would some people draw almost like they were, 5 and they got a hold of, daddy's box of crayons or markers and they colored all over the wall or something? To me, that's what a lot of that looks like. So
you notice they don't draw lettuce. They draw like beasts that are killed and eaten. They don't draw like turnips or lettuce. Just saying. Okay.
Yeah, something to think about. But anyway, so I was just thinking like, well, maybe all of like the old like glyphs and not all of them maybe, but a lot of these like cave drawings and stuff, maybe they were from a time where like, they could have just been teenage kids or, younger kids graffitiing on something. And anyone that wanted to save, real good art or images, they saved it, quantumly, in a granite rock, which then gave it this tinny look, I don't know, or coppery look. And then they had, I don't know, like a zither that would
a zither?
It's the weird instrument. I think that's the name of it.
I've heard
It's
of
an
those.
instrument.
Yeah.
So basically, it's putting sound into it. So then they could recall this image, like, let's say almost like holographically out of here using like certain tones.
So I think what we're going to say now is that this story is going to be partially about the Bronze Age, but then maybe also partially about whatever kind of crazy civilization came before, you know. I think it should kind of be Arthur feels like he is receiving messages from his master, but
Yeah.
Arthur doesn't know that the place that he is right now is the place that he was, you know, a couple thousand years in the past. He thinks that he's just here, but what his master is doing is leaving messages at a place that they can survive the thousands of years, and then Arthur just kind of finds them and thinks, oh, but really, he's been sent back in time, or he's been sent forward in time, you know?
Yeah,
maybe
one
like
of
an
the two.
exploratory mission, maybe like a go see what we're up to. You know, have you guys read, there's this radio drama about a guy who gets sent forward in time, right? He gets sent forward in time, and it's like the world is in chaos, and they get told that, like, it's this one space mission that started this day. That's what caused it. And he's like, oh, I'll go back and I'll tell them. And then he goes back and he forgets. And then they go, well, we want you on this space mission. It's going to launch this day. And it's that is the thing that caused the world to go terrible, but he, like, forgot. It's this really, it might be like a Twilight Zone or something, but that same sort of thing could be happening, where with Arthur, he feels like he was sent to a faraway land and that his master is sending him messages, where really he was just sent to exactly where the lab was a couple thousand years in the future, or 1,000 years in the future, or however many. And now he's just kind of piecing this together, doing this research to send back, you know. I don't mean to take over your thing, Seth, but I'm just trying to figure out a way. I like the time travel thing. I'm just trying to figure out a way that could work. What we could do is, this story could be the kind where it sort of jumps to the past and then jumps to the future, right? Where we see maybe this it could be that this master has, like, genetic experiments going where he's creating creatures, and he creates the red face, the fire heart bacteria, as a way to hardy up the population against the coming ice age, you know?
Yeah, that would
And so
make
he does
sense.
all this gene splicing, and so but what happens is he, like, destroys civilization because they, like, all tear each other apart.
Did you know that there's, like, a lot of archaeological speculation about what destroyed the Bronze Age civilization around somewhere between 1200 and 1175 BC. It's like all the Greeks and the Hittites and the people in Syria and the Mesopotamians and Egypt, all these people, they had this kind of like a world trade, kind of a loose configuration of things going along really smooth. And then, like, there was just a series of catastrophes. They talk about the sea people. Everybody was going to war and beating up on each other, and cities were being destroyed, and it just all kind of collapsed into kind of a dark age.
Right.
And without much explanation. You know, people have just thrown around this term, the sea people, but who are they and where did they come from?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that could be a lot of things. Like,
right.
we could figure out, we're explaining and figuring out right now what happened.
Right.
With the power of our imagination.
Okay.
So with the sea people, is this the same time Atlantis?
Well, there you go. I mean, there's been all kinds of speculation and very little actual concrete evidence.
Right. So maybe this, okay, so what we could say was that in the past, in the far past, right, where things were really advanced, this scientist had come up with, basically, there was no atmosphere, which was in any way harmful to humans. You know, you would like, if you wanted to live in the desert, you would just ingest this thing and it would rewrite your DNA, and then you would retain moisture and your eyes would adjust easy, and you wouldn't, you know, if you wanted to live in the water, you would just ingest this thing and wait for the amount of time, and then you would grow gills and you could swim underwater and you could stand the pressure. If you wanted to live up in the mountains, you just ingest this thing and your body would heat up and you would be fine. You know, there was nothing, there was no problem, there was no issues, right? However, this scientist felt an incredible amount of disquiet about the entire subject, right? Kind of like he'd achieved everything and then he kind of realized, oh, wait, what about morals? You know?
Pesky things, right?
Right. And so he devises a thing to send his assistant to the future to sort of report back to how we're doing.
That's great.
Right? And he can't report back because the rigors of time travel makes you forget or whatever. So to Arthur's view, he's receiving notes about what he needs to do. And maybe what he's doing is like getting enough minerals and aligning the crystals in the right way and doing all the things needed to recreate the machine, you know? And Seth said that he was around, so maybe he came originally and then went back or something. I don't know. So the story keeps jumping.
I mean, it would work. I think it would work if he was sent to the past. Okay, how would that work then? And maybe he was, and maybe he established, but like all he could remember is that he had a different master. Maybe he's been, let's say, creating this other master because he keeps getting notes from him to tell him what to do. So he's never, let's say, filled a role of, yeah, I'm kind of the top scientist of
Right.
the era, because he's still functioning off of all these, like, let's say, one-way communications on things to do, but he can't recollect that he actually was sent
Right.
to the future.
Right. And so the story keeps jumping back and forth from the future to the past, the future to the past. And we even see that the clan, the core clan of the Red Hearts or the Fire Hearts, mimic and are probably descendants of some test group that the scientist has in the past, you know?
Yeah, because this was a group of people that came out of the Stone Age.
Right.
So, like, how did these advances happen?
Right.
You know, archaeologists have been speculating about this well over thousands of years, yada, yada, yada. Well,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
There's a lot of evidence that a lot of crap is going on in what we would call prehistory.
Right. And even the clan who has the tin, you know, maybe they're very anti these things. And they know the formula, and they're trying to find the formula to sort of break it up. And they know that a fight's going to happen, and so they start amassing tin and putting it into the ground.
Ooh.
Right? I don't know.
So one idea, so like as far as like the sea people, right? So they had fled into different islands or different things like in the Mediterranean or off into the Atlantic. So if there's like an idea of because it was just added to the thing, and I know you guys are familiar with the fourth turning.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a reciprocal pattern of, well, I mean, kind of the classic, you know, like strong men make good times make weak men
Right.
make bad times make strong men, and kind of like
Yeah,
that. But then
generational theory, like how everything kind of turns back on itself.
Right. And so you have, let's say, like even you take the pyramids, and now again, I'm not going to say this as an exact truth, but I know the theory is out there that the pyramids are built on a platform that is much older than the pyramids, as in something else was already there before, probably got destroyed, and they probably rebuilt whatever it was on top, right?
Right.
That would be the idea. Someone said that, was it the one in Inca, the Machu Picchu?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. There's like base stones that obviously were there, and then a whole different kind of stonework that's on top of it that makes what we see now as Machu Picchu. Basically saying that whatever was here already, and then the next, let's say, Stone Age group of people came through and just rebuilt back on top of an older structure that they found.
Right.
So an idea with that is maybe, like, let's just take, like something like, let's say, I'll use like our current situation, not that's like our direct current situation, but I mean, yeah, I guess you could. You have ultimately what is a lot of countries are hitting like irreversible numbers of like population collapse, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so within 10, 20 years, the infrastructure that our society is built on is not going to sustain current levels. We're already
Right.
seeing that with how everything has played out in the last couple of years with supply chains, globalism as a whole. Whether you like globalism and that you can get dyes from Egypt and dye them in Indonesia and then make blue jeans in China and it ships all over the world, but you're able to get resources from all over the world. I thought of that because of the idea of the kind of the start of it and what you said where they had like all this trade going on and it was like they were able to boom this Bronze Age because they were able to get and transfer tin from the areas there was tin to areas that needed it, right? So without that, most of the other areas wouldn't have had, a Bronze Age, right? Okay, so anyways, so let's say the Sea People are the remnants of, let's say, that older society that basically overexerted themselves, got all this technology. However, with slight amount of catastrophe, like you take our stuff right now, a couple hits to the right parts of the grid, and what we know of, let's say, electricity is more or less done for, right? Not that we couldn't remake something, but it could, let's say, push our, from like a prepping idea, sure. So like the first generation or two after, let's say, a major calamity that limits or destroys the initial larger advanced society that we have, they'll remember, okay, I know how to make a generator, right? But we don't have all the, they don't have, lithium for the right type of battery, right? So they're going to go back to making, a clay jar with vinegar and, a copper wire in it, right? And they might have copper laying around. Well, as soon as most of that's done, well, now where are you going to mine copper, right? So you might have a sub-society after a collapse that is still like 10 times more advanced than, let's say, other survivors, groups of clans and survivors that are now in the Stone Age or having to rebuild from that don't know anything about this. And so now they're rising up back and they're finding different things as there's this other society that is now a smaller society, but remnant, and they remember and they've kept up some a semblance of this. However, then if you say, okay, so then the Sea People, like with the sinking of Atlantis, you have, because there was that idea that then another catastrophe, sunk Atlantis, and then those Sea People who would have escaped settled in all then around the Mediterranean or the coast of like the Atlantic or whatever it was.
Right.
And there's like then these like more advanced groups of people that moved into other people's societies and basically
co-opted them.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, here's what I'm thinking. Based on that, here's what I'm thinking. The whole premise for the story is different. So the whole world is alight with the idea because we know there was something before, and the introduction of bronze has only made it so that we can dig it up faster, right? So Atlantis wasn't built before before the Bronze Age. Atlantis was built in this before time, right, where the scientist is originally from, right? And the end of the book is going to be Arthur basically causing the giant wave that knocked the topsoil off of the top of Africa, right? Destroying Atlantis and setting the world back into a chaotic state, right? And it's going to be between Arthur and the scientist, where at first they're going to be together, working together, but then as it goes along, we've just found our villain. The scientist wants to preserve all of these things that he's done, right? Where at some point in time, Arthur is going to have to make a decision to go against the scientist because the scientist turns into the villain, you know? And inside of that, you have all the trade that's happening. You have the clan that doesn't trust science and these creatures and things that are weird, right? Because they have a genetic memory, right? They have like the because they are descendants of the rebellious force against the use of science in the way that the scientist was doing. They are the organization that was fighting him, right? They are the descendants of that organization. So they don't trust things that they don't understand. They don't trust outsiders. They absolutely do not trust these weird creatures. And they have this giant repository of tin that essentially allows them to fund who they are. And somehow Arthur learns their secret language, learns their secret code, their talk that's been only happened in their clan, their hand signal talk, right? Because he knows who they are. Because when he was in the past, he knew who this corporation was. He talked to them all the time, Maybe he even was with them. I don't know. And so then you have this kind of double-sided story, right? Arthur kind of going around the world, doing this, and then eventually splitting off from the scientist as the scientist starts sending things from the past, but not like sending things through a portal from the past, but like putting a creature in stasis and locking it in and burying it underground. And then like a couple thousand years later, it like breaks out and then tries to come and find him, just weird stuff like that. And then ending with maybe him using some sort of weather machine to destroy Atlantis, which was trying to basically bring back all of these things, and destroys Atlantis and, unfortunately also creates the Sahara Desert. What do you think about that, Seth?
I like it.
I just recently saw speculation that Atlantis is buried under the sand in the middle of what is now the Sahara Desert.
Yeah,
it is like the Eye of the Sahara.
Yeah, the Eye of the Sahara looks a lot like what Atlantis was described as, which was like a
ring inside of a ring inside of a ring. Yeah,
because it was like a concentric set of islands and water. So, anyways, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. I think we're one and done in this.
Absolutely. It's great.
I think this is a good one. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you like this episode, just let me know at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you did not like this episode, just let me know at @getsbettercast on Twitter. If you thought I could have done a better job coming up with factoids about this story, I want to hear about it. I also want to tell you, just wait. It gets better.